Good evening, Stonegate audience. This is take number 3. I am sorry for the technical difficulties tonight. Trying both Wi-Fi that we have here. I will just recap briefly then. I was teaching my younger son, Devin, to drive today, and I was really impressed by the need for basics. A lot of the things I take for granted because I've been driving a long time. Everything from when you come to a stop, trying to come to more of a gradual stop and not hitting the brakes at the last minute, to when you come off of a stop, hitting the gas pedal somewhat gradually instead of just flooring it. And then when you're parking, trying to kind of look at the course you're going to take into your spot and making sure you stop at an appropriate distance and keeping it between the lines. So good job. It looks like we are still working here. So that actually got me into thinking about note investing and some of the most basic things about note investing. My friends know that I've been talking about note investing for a couple of years now, and sometimes they get it, but sometimes I still get very, very basic questions. So I decided to break this down tonight to the most basic. When you buy a note, the big question you have to answer is who pays? That is really the key. And you have to try to look at all the information you have and then try to make judgments about the future when you're weighing risk. So really it comes down to usually two things, and there's a lot of different variations that I can cover in another webinar. This isn't meant to be all inclusive tonight, but it's going to end up being either the borrower is going to repay you back or the house itself, the asset, the underlying security. The borrower, you can try to get all the information you can about the borrower. If the borrower has a better credit, that's good. If the borrower has some what we call emotional equity in the house, if it looks like the house is kept up, that's another good sign. If it's a performing note and the borrower has been paying on time for a couple of years, that's establishing a really, really good track record. They are more likely to pay in that event. Even on a performing note, or excuse me, a non-performing note, there are things that you look at to try to see whether or not the borrower is likely to start paying again. Trying to decide if the house is going to pay you. It is important on a performing note because you're looking at that as kind of your backstop, so to speak. If they do stop paying, then you do get the house as collateral. But it's actually more important than on a non-performing note, because let's face it, on a non-performing note, you're dealing with a borrower who, for whatever reason, has stopped paying. So there is an increased chance that you will end up taking the house back as collateral or selling it at a foreclosure auction or something along those lines. But you just want to keep coming back to that as you're collecting your information and doing your due diligence. Always be thinking, who pays? So when you think about that, the other thing to think about is your 3 biggest risks with regard to really any type of note investing. Those 3 biggest risks are, number 1, taxes. Taxes are so important because even on a first position lien, if a house does not have property taxes paid, that can take priority over your first position mortgage. First position mortgage just means it's the initial money that was lent, and if anything happens with regards to the house, the first mortgage holder, they get first dibs on whatever comes of that house if it was to get sold, for example. So taxes are very important because those tax sale can take priority over even a first position mortgage if that's what you're buying. Number 2, title. Okay, that title is very important because a title issue can also really mess up the chain of ownership and can make it really hard for you to enforce a loan. So on almost every note, you want to make sure you have a clean title report, or at least an O&E, an ownership and encumbrance report. The number 3 biggest risk would be a blighted property. So you don't want to, buy a note and think you've got this house as the underlying collateral, only to find out that the house is in really, really poor condition. Or say that you thought the house was worth, I don't know, $80,000, and in fact, it's only worth $40,000. And then if you do have to get the house back or take it to sale, then you're only getting half in that case of what you thought the house was like. What the house was worth. That would really potentially blow up your deal. So again, those three biggest basic risks to always keep in mind and always make sure that you are looking after: tax, title, and blighted property. Tax, we take care of that. We just look at, again, the title report, but then I also go one step further. I check online and then I call the county to make sure that the taxes are up to date. The title, like I said, we can accommodate that by looking at an O&E or a title report. And then blighted property, that's a risk that we mitigate by having eyes on the property. Ideally, my own eyes. If not my eyes, then probably a realtor or a really good friend of mine, something along those lines. So that should do it for tonight. Thank you very much. These are the basics that we look at on any note that we look at the purchase. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I will be sure to answer. Until next week, thank you for joining us, and that's how you climb the hill. Thank you very much. Have a good night. Bye-bye.